Mitchell WerBell, covert operative, arms dealer, weapons technician, mercenary, and so much more. Hello everybody, my name is Anthony, and today I'm going to be talking about Mitchell WerBell III. Mitchell WerBell was born on March 8, 1918, in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, in the US. And just like his father, a Tsarist cavalry officer, he was a military man. And in 1942, he joined the Office of Strategic Services, the American Espionage and Intelligence Agency during World War II. WerBell served in the Signal Corps, the group that manages intelligence and communication, as a second lieutenant, operating in the China-Burma theater behind Japanese lines. While the OSS was dissolved shortly after the end of the war, he made many connections while working there which would come in handy in his future escapades. After the war, WerBell worked as the director for public relations at a department store in Georgia. But after around a year, he left to found his own PR firm. This company was by no means his only venture, and WerBell embroiled himself in, well, pretty much everything. During the late 1950s, WerBell involved himself in a number of Caribbean adventures. In 1959, doing covert work for Fulgencio Batista, the then dictator of Cuba, who was overthrown in the same year. During 1959, WerBell had extensive communication with the CIA, an organization that, due to his OSS service, he had many contacts within, as well as other parts of the US government. In early July of that year, he had several conversations with various officials on the recent Castro takeover in Cuba and the Dominican Republic, where WerBell was planning a trip. He divulged his own information on the area, and the CIA considered him for a job, but terminated any offers because the agency deemed his information not valuable and because he was suspected of using their money for his personal use. Over the following decades, WerBell continued covert and mercenary work, primarily in the Caribbean, and in 1962, the US government became aware that WerBell had been visiting several Central American countries and asking them to recognize a Cuban exile government. This government was called the United Organization for the Liberation of Cuba, and he claimed it had the support of 160,000 Cuban exiles and 90 exilee organizations. Apart from a few CIA memos, nothing came from this. The next year, however, WerBell was put under scrutiny after the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. But despite various claims on his involvement in the incident, he is classified as not believed relevant in association with the murder. In 1965, during the Dominican Civil War, WerBell acted as an advisor to the Dominican government, bringing along his son. WerBell didn't stop at covert affairs, and took his skill with firearms to a commercial level. While he managed several weapons manufacturing operations throughout his life, the most influential was Psionics, studies in the operational negation of insurgents and counter-subversion. We can be grateful that the acronym sounds nice. Though originally tasked with creating suppressors for the M14 and M16 rifles, through Psionics, WerBell developed revolutionary new suppressors for all sorts of guns, and he is credited with over 25 different suppressor designs. Psionics would remain with WerBell for the rest of his life, though it would later be absorbed into the Military Armament Company, later called the Cobra Company, later called LANAD, in the 1960s. He would eventually go on to partner with Gordon B. Ingram, inventor of the MAC-10 submachine gun, to create a suppressed version, which would be sent to Vietnam for combat evaluation. Around the end of the decade, WerBell himself showed up in Vietnam, which at this point had been embroiled in conflict for over a decade. WerBell was no tourist, and through some means had paperwork classifying him as a major general, but in reality, nobody knew what rank he really was. He led a portion of the South Vietnamese Airborne, and after a while, departed the country. In 1969, WerBell was spotted in Thailand, representing himself as the vice president of Psionics, and claiming to be the chief of the CIA in Thailand in an attempt to sell weapons to the Thai government. Age did nothing to slow down WerBell, and the 1970s were filled with just as much action as the rest of his life. The 1970s found WerBell involved in several schemes across the Caribbean, most notably the Abaco independence movement. The AIM and Friends of Abaco were organizations dedicated towards the independence of the island of Abaco, located in the Bahamas. The group was composed of high-class individuals, ranging from members of the British House of Lords to rich and mysterious political theorists, and finally, around 1974, to WerBell himself. WerBell, at this point in time, was a persona non grata in the Bahamas. However, due to political failures in the Bahamas, as well as some of WerBell's own comments on paramilitary activities, the group was discredited and in 1977 collapsed. In April of 1975, WerBell attempted to smuggle several tons of Colombian marijuana into the United States via Miami. He was caught and in June indicted, but as far as I could tell, he was never sent to prison. In 1976, WerBell founded the Cobra School, a training ground for people interested in learning self-defense skills. Located on WerBell's private estate in Powder Springs, Georgia, the Cobra School provided an in-depth curriculum of weapon usage and counterterrorism. He would teach at the school for several years, until dying of a heart attack in December of 1983, age 65. Vietnam, the Caribbean, and the globe. Behind every corner and none at all. Mitchell WerBell III.